I have a pretty cool job. The coolest thing about it is that it can be done anywhere in the whole world. On a whim, I can just pack up my belongings and move on to whatever better and brighter things I may be searching for. So, what is this dream job that pays well and allows for travel and work anywhere in the world? Trade work. That's right, building trade work. Personally, I specialize in commercial drywall installation and finishing, but I can do many tasks needed for construction. My father always told me to go to college, get a degree, and what he would call a real job, so that I wouldn't have to suffer his fate, what he called working for a living. But at the same time, the old man would preach on and on about how it would benefit me to learn a trade or two. That way, he figured it, I would have a trade to fall back on in case my college degree-fueled career path happened to fall short. I never really had much of a choice in the matter anyway. My father was a drywall foreman for over 3 decades, and his father a carpenter foreman before him. Like it or lump it, by the time I was 19 years old, I could keep up and even surpass most older members of my trade, which secured me more work. I learned to love what I do, and I never had much patience for school, or anything for that matter. So without conscious effort or personal drive to get me there, I had found my place in the world. I guess you could say that I didn't choose trade work as my profession. It kind of chose me. I've gotten to see some great places, meet some interesting people, take part in some impressive projects, but that's kind of the thing. Work is always a little stressful because no job will ever last, and you can never anticipate where or what you'll be doing next. And most people are great, but even a good portion of them are just wolves in sheep's clothing. Like this one guy I used to work with, you'd never would have known that something was so deeply troubling about him. He seemed nice enough, knew his job, and stayed diligent all day. So, needless to say, when I saw this guy pull a pistol from his work bucket one day, I was completely taken aback. Wow, that's a cool gun, I said to him after he showed it to me proudly. I swear to God, this dude pulls a gun from his tool bucket like there's nothing weird about it, shows it to me proudly, and says he carries it on every job, just like that. Like he was saying, the sky is blue, or hey, it's summer. I did my best to sound interested and take leave for the portable toilet as inconspicuously as I could at my first opportunity, but I, of course, went straight for the project manager to inform him of the dangerous weapon on site. Needless to say, the guy was immediately let go. It's pretty much common sense that a gun has no purpose on a construction site. Another guy that I used to know shot his wife and her lover before ending his own life with the same revolver. I'm pretty sure I've even worked with a few pedophiles, but I can't quite say for certain. Those accusations are typically bound to rumor and hearsay. It's not like those guys are able to parade their actions around proudly. They'd get lynched by the ladder of the workers, which surely constitute a larger population of them. The point is, you just never know who you actually work with. You see these people every day, shake hands, exchange stories, but you can't actually know who they really are. Case in point, the last job I worked was cold. Drywall finishing is supposed to be done within a range of temperatures, generally, as long as the work area remains above 55 degrees, the joint compound will cure properly. Anything below that, the shit just won't dry. Same thing goes for paint, by the way. The worst happens once paint or mud, as it's called, freezes, and the composition of glues, resins, gypsum, and other parts all begin to separate, causing the material to literally fall apart. The result is nothing short of a sticky mess, non-drying substances succumbing to gravity and falling to the floor in globs. Well, I'm a good little robot, and I do whatever I'm told, no complaints. I know my job, I do it well, and I pride myself on being very easy to get along with. So, if my boss tells me to do something counterproductive, say paint a wall in a room that's below freezing, I'll do it, because he's the man that signs my checks. When I walk onto this job, the cold I first mentioned is the first thing I noticed. The second is the lack of workers. Most jobs are bustling with hundreds of people. This one seemed nearly dead quiet. The site was a building complex with multiple structures. There were a few workers scattered throughout the various units, but to depict the scene clearly, I was the only worker in the entire, what was called, Building 13. The other thing of note is Eric. Eric, as he introduced himself, first met me while sanding out an apartment unit in Building 13. From the moment I laid eyes on this guy, I could tell there was just something about him that I couldn't place a finger on. But whatever it was, it made him come across as off or strange, and certainly not to be trusted. Even when the guy shook my hand and insisted that if I needed anything to just ask for him, I knew that he was full of shit. But like I said, I'm pretty easy to get along with, made sure to be polite, and I thanked him. I should have quit that day. So, a few weeks go by, and I'm out of Building 13. The days have grown a bit longer, but also a bit colder in comparison with the weeks recently passed. Well, someone got this great idea that it would be a perfect time to tape the garages, to do the drywall finishing over the sheetrock for those of you that don't know what taping is. That's all well and great, except those garages have no heat. Of course, I tell my boss this, and he tells me to coat them anyway. Now, because I don't like freezing to death and being uncomfortable, I made a calculated decision to work through my lunch break. This would not help to keep me warm, but it would end the torture of the day that much faster. After running this past my boss via my cell phone, I got him to agree. Looking back, this is the point where everything went terribly wrong again. The following day after work, I'm driving home when I receive a phone call. The caller, my boss. I scan my surroundings for police, and when I see none, I answer the phone and place it to my ear. Long story short, fucking Eric called my boss and told him that I was leaving early, obviously unknowing of my new work schedule and lack of a lunch. My boss, John, tells me that I have to go back to working the normal day's shift, lunch and all. This is honestly no big deal to me, and I of course acquiesced, but why would that snake go behind my back like that? The following day, colder than the last, Eric meets me in the garage for a little chat. I let into him a little bit, irritated with the cold and the cluttered garages, and I make it a point to explain very slowly my new work schedule, as if talking to someone who is severely mentally challenged. I certainly got my point across because the following day, the shit hit the fan. I began my morning hopeful. It was damn cold, but by this time, I was well prepared. I had only one garage left to finish, and I had just sharpened my mason's trowel. The compound was cold and stiff, but the newly sharpened edges of my sword-like tool helped cut through the resistance. Earbuds singing out some classical rock beneath two hoods, I was well into the last garage and lost in my own world when John, my boss, entered through the back door. I greeted him, holding all my tools in one hand so I could shake his with my free one. The guy was nice enough to stop and tell me that he had another job with installed permanent heat only a few miles away, and asked if I'd rather head there first for what would only be a few hours worth of work. I had just mixed my mud and strapped my legs into drywall stilts, So I told him that if it was all the same, since I was all set up, that I would just finish what I was doing and then head over to the second site. He agreed, and I thought that was it. Only 5 minutes later, while pushing my trowel across the ceiling above me, the back door opens again, and in steps a smiling Eric. He's a big guy, but on stilts, I'm towering over him. He opens his mouth to ask me what should be some very simple questions, but there's something in his eyes, an expression on his face, and by the time he finishes his rhetorical inquiry about mud freezing, I recognize it. Spiteful sarcasm. He had come in gunning for a fight. As I try to explain to him the difference between separation and prolonged drying time, he gets louder and louder until he's screaming sentences I don't even understand anymore for no reason that I can perceive. I, of course, start to yell back, the irritation from the cold and the blatant ignorance festering in my brain like a poison. Soon, I too was shouting words that seemed to pass through no mental filter. In a yell, Eric informed me that he didn't appreciate my attitude at that moment or the day before. I responded by calling him a piece of shit. Keep in mind, I'm an extra 2 feet taller than I normally would be, standing on a hard cement surface strapped into drywall stilts. Eric reached out with his arms, swiftly, connecting his hands to my torso, giving me a sharp push. Not only is fighting on a job site a huge no-no, but pushing a guy on stilts is dangerous and disrespectful in more ways than I have time to put down on paper. The next few moments are a blur. The rage and surprise of the audacity of the act left my brain swimming, coalescing with my emotions until all I could see was red. Eric approached me, yelling. I said nothing as I reached up with my right hand and plunged my freshly sharpened trowel downward in such an angle that the razor-like corner of the blade broke through Eric's skull with ease at the right socket. Adrenaline pulsed through my veins, my neck throbbed as I watched the large man fall backwards onto the concrete with a thud, the 14-inch trowel sticking out of his face like a car antenna. I smiled as I watched him struggle in both pain and the damage that I had done for a few moments as I began to unstrap my stilts. By the time I had both feet planted on the floor, he was dead. I have said that there are many perks to my job, and one of them is that there's a million places to hide a body. It's not like I've never done this before, and my job allows me to move anywhere I want to. I know the lesson well. I've experienced the true deceit of those one thinks they know. But when I finished hiding the body parts in places that will now stand for decades to come and scrubbed the floor of the garage, I knew that Eric had learned that very lesson the hard way. You can never truly know the people that you only work with.